that kind of segues us perfectly onto the next question about, as well as that dehumanization and even desensitization to different, themes online, there's also a growing sense of digital isolation. Despite being constantly connected to that tool, it is a very isolating experience if you're sort of consumed by it. But how do you think kindness could help combat this?
And that's where, for me, I think there's some intention around thinking about, well, okay, what does kindness look like? And that might be, for yourself to reflect on. Obviously, there are sources, and Time for Kindness is one of them, obviously, where you can go and look for examples. Yeah. But I think that helps then in terms of where you then choose to put your focus. And what I believe is that there is lots of kindness in the world already. We just don't talk about it enough yet. And that's sort of where it came from. And so I thought, well, what can I do about that? Because I'm a comms person, I'm a storyteller. It started as just telling stories of kindness, of everyday kindness, sharing examples. My then 13-year-old daughter taught me how to use Instagram so that I could put these stories out there.
Welcome to this week's episode of Akoni Tech Talks. We are joined by Sarah today. It's a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sarah, can you start by telling us a bit about your journey and what inspired you to create the Time for Kindness program and focus your work on helping people see kind?
Sure, absolutely. And I can talk about it all day. So I'm glad we started with that question.
Yes.
So I'm Sarah and I am a kindness cheerleader. And I founded about 4 years ago now what has become, as you say, the Time for Kindness program. And it came about, so I'm a communications professional by training, as it were. I've worked in comms for a long time, and I've worked with a lot of not-for-profit organisations of various sorts. And I'd always talked about them as having a vision of a better world. And then I got to thinking, I think it was late 2020, when I think we were all going, what on earth happened there? And one day I don't even really know why, I just got to think, what do you mean by better, Sarah? Yeah. And it was at that point that I thought, do you know what? What I believe in is kindness. And what I believe is that there is lots of kindness in the world already. We just don't talk about it enough yet. And that's sort of where it came from. And so I thought, well, what can I do about that? Because I'm a comms person, I'm a storyteller. It started as just telling stories of kindness, of everyday kindness, sharing examples. My then 13-year-old daughter taught me how to use Instagram so that I could put these stories out there. And the reason I went for Instagram at that point was because I had heard, and I believe this is true, it generally had a bit more of a positive vibe and a bit more of a kind of storytelling vibe as well. So that suited well with what I was trying to do. And then the program has grown from there, because what became apparent, I got lots of positive feedback, people saying, I love what you're doing, love hearing the stories. But what became apparent was that for some of us, it comes more easily to see kindness than others. And so that it has now expanded the program so that I now run workshops, give talks, that kind of thing, to teach people the habits to notice kindness in the world around them. Because as I say, there is a lot, we just don't talk about it enough.
Absolutely, yes. And kindness is such a powerful concept, but it's often overlooked in fast-paced environments. As you say, it's not always that noticeable for people. But why do you think it's so important to actively notice and value kindness, especially in today's digital world?
Well, absolutely, and I think kindness has a bit of a reputation problem, perhaps, in the sense that it can be seen as a bit weak and a bit fluffy. Yeah. But I completely disagree with that, and there's a growing body of academic research that also shows that kindness is powerful, and one of the reasons it is powerful is because it connects us as humans. And therefore, in terms of why is it important, I think it's that connection that's really important. What was really interesting, like I said to you, it was I from very early on, I got positive feedback, and it was it started out, people were saying to me, I've seen what you're doing, I really like it. And it started that I was like, thank you very much. Lovely, thank you. And then I thought, perhaps I'll to ask them why. Dig a little bit deeper. So I did, I explored that a bit more, and the words that kept coming up was that people said, it makes me feel positive, and it makes me feel hope in a world that doesn't always give us that. And then I had a situation where somebody got in touch with me, somebody I don't know particularly well, but I hadn't seen him for a while. I knew he had mental health challenges. he got in touch with me and said, look, I've seen what you're doing. The kindness of strangers has recently literally saved me. Please keep doing what you're doing, because when you're in that dark place, you can't see it for yourself.
Yeah.
So knowing that there is something you can turn to very easily, there is kindness. And that's sort of where the point at which, that was probably about a year in, and I thought, I need to step this up a bit, really. And I think it is, in terms of noticing kindness, it is almost like a first easy step, really, into, sometimes for all sorts of reasons, being kind is not something you're ready to do or you're able to do, but we can always see kindness. There is always something around us. I think it's really important as well, just to make clear that what I'm talking about is not toxic positivity. I'm not saying we'll ignore that stuff. Clearly some terrible stuff goes on in the world, and certainly online and digitally, but that's not the only story. And that's what bothers me, is that if we're not careful, we start to kind of believe that's the only story and that's what we're all like and that's what the world is like. It's just not true.
Absolutely. And from your perspective, how can digital tools and platforms actually foster kindness and a connection? Are there sort of any examples you've seen where tech has really enhanced empathy or well-being?
Yeah, I think you see it a lot in online communities and groups. And for me personally, so I work freelance, I work for myself, and I am in a group called the Freelance Lifestylers, which was it was originally a Facebook group. They're actually in the process now of moving to a different Discord, so a different platform. The group has been going for a long time. It's time for a bit of an update, a refresh, moving on to something else. But I mean, regardless of what the platform name is, as it were, what's really good about it is that it brings together people who are working freelance. I mean, we all do different sorts of things, some of us are doing similar things, some are different, but that core of what it means, and it is called the Freelance Lifestylers because it isn't a purely work-based thing. So, on cold days, some of us will be sharing photos of our slippers and our heated blankets in our home offices and all of that sort of stuff. So it's for me, what's great about that community is it's brought people together. Some of it is work-based, so if I get something I'm a bit stuck on, I can say, it's like the hive mind thing, isn't it? Like, what has anyone else done this? Any tips, that kind of thing. But equally, it's just that kind of sense of community and people who kind of get it. Some people, sometimes you have someone there saying, I've got somebody who's not paying my invoice, what should I do? So it's kind of a whole mixture really of community and learning and that kind of thing. And I think that's what is a lot of the kind of best spaces online, the best experiences online are those kinds of things where you find your tribe and you find the people that are like you, that have same challenges. I think there is also something to be said around using tech and online digital spaces to learn about people who aren't like you. But I think in terms of that connection piece, for me, that's a huge part of my digital life.
Definitely. And it wouldn't be a sort of well-rounded debate or discussion if we didn't explore the flip side as well. So what would you say are some of the biggest risks or downsides of digital communication when it comes to kindness? I mean, you touched on, online has its impact of bullying, trolling, digital dehumanization, but how can we kind of tackle those issues?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and as I said, we have to look at the dark side of things as well, and recognise that exists. And I think some of the kind of lack of kindness in this space comes, as you've said, from the dehumanisation, sort of keyboard warrior kind of. It's important to stand up for things you believe in. Of course, it is. However, I think. Just you mentioned earlier about speed as well, and kind of at such pace, people are not taking that moment to think, actually, is this the appropriate in terms of kind of the level of intensity or the language I'm using, or that kind of thing, and I think that's where the dehumanising side of it comes in, and that's when the connection kind of breaks down. And I guess something else that maybe is an issue is around a lot of digital spaces, it's about content, isn't it?
Yeah.
All of digital spaces
yes, yeah.
are about content. And so actually that can be, you're in transmit mode, you're kind of putting stuff out, and really, in order to kind of really connect and have positive relationships with people, online or offline,
yes,
we need to listen more.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the digital space kind of amplifies that, kind of gets stuff out, and
yes,
perhaps kind of dials down, or has the potential to dial down the listening element of it, and that's when it can spiral.
Absolutely. That kind of segues us perfectly onto the next question about, you know, as well as that dehumanization and even desensitization to different, you know, themes online, there's also a growing sense of digital isolation. Despite being constantly connected to that tool, it is a very isolating experience if you're sort of consumed by it. But how do you think kindness could help combat this, and what role does intentional communication play?
Yeah, and it's, I think there's lots of elements to that really, and in the workshops that I run, we always start by talking about what is kindness. And what's really interesting is there is no single definition of kindness.
Yes.
I have a variety of ones that I use. They've all got, you know, themes through them, obviously, they're all quite similar. And one of the things that we end up talking about often in the workshops is around what counts as kindness. And I find that absolutely fascinating, because personally, I run quite a broad definition.
Yeah.
And I am quite happy. So, for example, people will say things like, but that's just good manners, or that's just doing my job. That's not kindness. And I mean, personally, I think, well, I run a broad definition, and if recognising something as kindness gives us a positive boost and makes us feel better individually and collectively, which it does, why don't we just call it kindness? Because it can be both.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be either or. It can be good manners and kind. It can be doing your job and kindness.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention that is because I think there is an element of intention within that as well. So I think there is a line, and again, you know, some digital kind of online spaces kind of cross that line in terms of what's your intention in doing this act of kindness. You know, are you doing it purely so that you can film it and get likes and clicks? Then you know, there's a question there about where is that line where actually no, that's not kindness anymore. I think in terms of you know, people will say, well, if you get a benefit from it, then it's not kindness. The academic research shows us that there is a benefit to giving kindness, receiving kindness, and witnessing it. Almost impossible to have an act of kindness that doesn't have some kind of benefit for you. That's okay. Again, you know, it's where is that line? So I think, you know, in terms of for yourself and that kind of isolation piece and intentional communication in particular, you need to have a better understanding of, well, what does kindness mean for you? And that's where, for me, I think there's some intention around thinking about, well, okay, what does kindness look like? And that might be, you know, for yourself to reflect on. Obviously, there are sources, and Time for Kindness is one of them, obviously, where you can go and look for examples. But I think that helps then in terms of where you then choose to put your focus. One of my favourite kindness examples that we were sent in right back in the beginning of when I was setting it up, and this is an offline one actually, but there was some a shopping centre, double doors, and some of them were broken. There was only one set of working doors basically, and there was an older lady trying to come through with a little walker, and she couldn't get through because people were streaming in. The person that sent it in to us, they noticed this lady and they stopped so that she could come through. Now, it would be really easy to put your attention solely on the people that streamed through, and well, of course, you know, no one stops these days, but someone did. And actually, let's focus on that, and let's focus on the kindness. And I think, again, online, it's really easy to get into that mindset of, isn't it, of it's all awful and people are horrible on this platform. And yes, some people are. I don't deny that does happen. But equally, there are also lots of great spaces. There's lots of positive stuff. So I think if you can find a way to sort of reset your own mindset around that helps. The other thing, I think, is that self-kindness is important too.
Yes, absolutely.
And so actually sometimes being online, being in a digital space is not the kind thing to do for yourself. And it's okay to step away, go outside. I mean, we're filming here with a beautiful view out the windows over there of the lake, and even on a grey day, the greenery and everything makes you feel better. And again, there's science to that of kind of being outside makes you feel better, being with friends in real life, as it were, makes you feel better. So again, I think it's a question of balance.
Yes.
And where your own balance is going to be different. For some people, just a little bit of that time will help, but for others, you need to kind of rebalance it a lot more. But I think it is that intentional piece is the key, really, to not just kind of drifting along, but making those conscious decisions of what am I doing and why am I doing it, and what else could I be doing, either instead or alongside.
I think it's interesting what you say about, I was thinking about the self-kindness element as well, purely because, especially when it comes to digital, I'm sure other people have had or done the same, but I decided to be a bit more intentional about the kind of accounts that I follow on social media, because like a lot of people, you do end up on your phone at the end of a working day and you're scrolling, but there is such a thing as doom scrolling and constantly seeing negativity or upsetting content online or things that might affect your self-worth or belief. So I decided to be more intentional about the accounts I follow, so I could see kindness or inspiration or motivation. So it kind of links us on to when it comes, that's how we view things personally, but when it comes to work as well, in the workplace, that's kind of impacted the flow of tech and kindness. So especially in remote and hybrid settings now, which is very apparent, what would you say are a few simple ways that leaders can use tech to build a more connected and kind working culture?
And absolutely, I think it's really important to recognise, isn't it, that it doesn't have to be completely on or off, as you say. For your job you have to be online, and some jobs actually you have to be watching the news more often, for example, or you have to have some time with content which might have a negative impact on you. So I think that, as you say, the way that organisations are set up, the way that businesses are set up, is really important within that, in terms of kind of that support. One of the things, some of the workshops that I run, some of the longer workshops, we spend quite a bit of time at the end action planning around, so we've found out what kindness is, why it matters, what it looks like to us, how it makes us feel. Now let's think about, so how are we going to take that forward? How are we going to keep that going in our workspace? And one of the things that comes up time and time again, and it's really simple, is that teams will say, do you know what, we're going to start every meeting by sharing a story of kindness. And it's a great way to kind of set the tone for that meeting. You still have to discuss the operational difficulties. You still have to discuss the budget challenges, all of that stuff. It doesn't change anything, that doesn't make any of it go away. But what it does mean is it puts you in a better frame of mind and a bit more resilient to have those conversations and start those conversations. So that's a really easy one. In terms of, as you said, kind of in a hybrid world, we're not necessarily seeing each other all the time. So again, back to intention and kind of consciously choosing to do things, putting check-in times in. It doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be heavy, but if you're a manager of a team, leader of a team, you can just take the first part of your day just to check in, see how everyone's doing, that kind of thing. And in all honesty, you ought to be doing that whether you're online or in the office anyway. So I think a lot of this that we've talked about today, and a lot of things around digital, we kind of think, well, it's tech, it's digital, it must be different. But we're still humans. So actually, sometimes it doesn't have to be that different. It's the kind of the mode and the channel we're using that's different, but the way that we're looking out for each other, checking in with each other, doesn't have to be. If you're an organisation that has some kind of tech that you can have different channels set up on it, you can have a Slack channel, for example, that's around pets. that's a very popular one very often. Pets or hobbies or like non-work things.
Yeah.
So that you've got that way for people to connect that's not always about work.
Absolutely. And you've shared inspiring stories on other podcasts, but is there sort of a standout moment or story where kindness and technology has sort of come together in a really powerful way?
Yeah. Do you know, when I knew you were going to ask that question, I thought, I don't think we've had many about it. And I don't think it's because it's not happening.
Yes.
I think it's because we don't get told about it so often.
Yeah.
However, I did kind of go back through and have a look and see, and I think there was a few that stuck out. And actually, one of them, sort of following on from what we were saying before, relates to use of Zoom, actually.
Yeah.
And we had somebody get in touch with us who had to do a Zoom work meeting, and her young son was off school for some reason, and so she had thought, oh no, this is a bit awkward, a bit embarrassing, got, you know, the lad with me or whatever, but her colleagues were really friendly and welcoming and said hello to him, and then I can't remember what age he was, but he was primary age.
Yeah.
And they'd said to him, oh, you know, would you like to draw us a picture while Mummy does her meeting? Which he did. So he got on and kept himself busy with that. And then at the end of the meeting, he showed them the picture.
That's
and
so
they
sweet.
all were glowed about it.
Yeah.
And there was the mum that sent it in to us and said, you know, it was great because it was, you know, it made me feel better. So it was kind of kindness to me that I didn't feel so awkward about him being there. But what I also like, and obviously they were kind to him because they praised his picture and what have you. What I also like about that is that kid is an employee of the future.
Yeah.
So actually, I think there was kindness as well in that, in showing him that work can be a positive thing, can be a positive experience.
Yeah.
So you know, that's an all-round one that I really like. The other one that we do get quite often are stories related to often WhatsApp groups.
Yes.
So like, a lot of us, I think, during COVID in particular, you know, we had we certainly where I live, we have a road WhatsApp group that was set up at that point in time for collecting prescriptions and shopping, but has continued, and there's a lot of kindness within that in terms of people sharing things with each other. Where I live is the end of a sort of a loop on the end of a very long road, is the only way in and out, and going back a little while, there were some road works going to be on the road out, and suddenly the message went round, you know, if anyone needs to get out, now is the time to do it. We've had examples of that where people have lost, that was one recently, somebody lost a bank card, and actually it was found through kind of use of those kind of local networks online and so on. So there is lots of kindness there in tech. I just, as I say, that's not the bit that I'd immediately thought of, but it is there when you look for it.
Definitely. And how can we each contribute to building a kinder digital world, even in small everyday moments? I mean, you've touched on something as simple as a community WhatsApp group for your road. That's actually a very lovely example of being kind in that sort of capacity. But are there any other examples?
I mean, I think it comes back to that kind of remembering that we are human, and whether we're in a digital space or we're offline, we are human, and so are they, and so being a little bit more mindful about how we interact with each other. Something I was reading a newsletter yesterday, this guy called Graham Alcott who writes a lot about kindness, particularly in the workplace, and he was talking about AI, and he was kind of lessons and learning from AI, and one of the things he said was, you know, actually in a world where a lot of tech is about things being the same, so effectively kind of beige, kind of into that. Actually, we as humans we can add the colour, we can bring the personality. So I think there are, in some cases, really a simple way is to kind of be brave enough to be you, and to speak up about things that are important to you, and actually often what you find is you do get better response to that as well, and I think those sorts of, obviously you have to do it in a way that is feels right for you, and that you are as safe as you can be. All those kind of things come with it as well. But I think it helps all of us if we have a range of different perspectives and different voices, and we have those kinds of conversations. So I know you asked for kind of simple things, and that's not always simple. But maybe finding like little ways that you can, even if something as simple as kind of the way you dress, or wearing something literally a bit more colourful. Those kinds of things. Online world is often very visual as well, isn't it? So that can be a way of spreading kindness.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's one piece of advice you'd give to someone feeling overwhelmed by negativity online and looking for more kindness in their digital space?
I think it's some of what you said earlier about unfollowing.
Yeah.
If you've got something that you're seeing that doesn't make you feel good, and in fact quite the opposite, makes you feel bad, then unfollow. Find stuff online that makes you feel good, makes you feel better, and finding those kind of sources of joy. And I, again, a bit of a plug for Time for Kindness, because we do share at least one story every day across our social media and our website. And in fact, looking back through it earlier for stories to share with you, I thought, you know what? Yeah, actually, there is a lot. And I run it. I use a social media manager, so she does the actual. She's brilliant. She does the publication for me. But there is a lot there that you can find.
Yeah.
You do perhaps have to start intentionally going out and finding it, but I think that's a good starting point.
What does seeing kind look like to you in the digital age?
So I think it's actively looking out for kindness. I mean, I my kind of tag that I use is kind of, when you see kind, you feel better, and when you feel better, you perform better. Whatever performance means in your particular context. So I think it's kind of actively looking out and being aware, as we discussed earlier, kind of where are you putting your focus? If there's one of the tips that I share with people in my workshops is try and catch yourself and how you're thinking about things, because if you're looking at a sort of a negative interpretation of a situation, it's worth thinking, actually, is there another way to look at this? Can I find kindness in this? And it's one of those things as well that the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
And we come on to the trending in tech round. I would say there's two parts to the trending in tech round. Recently, there was the Netflix series Adolescence, and that's obviously been highly topical in the news. It's been in politics as well, talking about, school culture, the impact of relationships between parents and child, and a lot of what we see figures on social media, people like Andrew Tate as well. And I feel like it's made me think about some of the things we've been talking today. I mean, our audience is a mixture of students, but we'll also have other people from our LinkedIn community who will listen to the podcast. Looking at both sides of it, if a parent is looking at how they can improve their relationship with their child, even so, it's kind of brought about, I saw a lot of feedback after the episode about parents being friends with their children, or having that kind of relationship where it might lack discipline. I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there. But in terms of, how can we support the younger generation in being a bit more mindful and intentional of how to use those online spaces to promote kindness, rather than falling down into a trap of, being influenced by social media? What kind of guidelines or opinion would you offer to someone who's sort of really thinking about how unsafe perhaps those digital spaces are now?
It's I should say, as a caveat, is I haven't watched Adolescence.
I
have read a lot about it. I've heard a lot about it. I haven't watched it, and partly why I haven't watched it is because I think I would find it too upsetting. However, as you say, awful lot to unpack. And I certainly, although I am a parent of a teenager, I have a teenage daughter, I would not set myself up as an expert in any way in this regard. But I think a lot of it, so I think there's a whole load of stuff.
Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me, so as I mentioned, I have a teenage daughter.
Yeah.
And we do, I do feature stories sometimes that she has told me about. Her friends have been kind. I get other stories sometimes sent in about kind teenagers. And she did say to me once a little while ago, Mum, I don't think it's very fair that the story that is put out about teenagers, you know, we hear about the quote-unquote bad one, but there's this sort of idea that perhaps teenagers are not kind. You know what? The vast majority of them, I would say, are a lot of kindness. And when I share stories of kindness from and about teenagers, they're always very popular. So I think there is something about you know, in terms of, like you said, how can we support teenagers? How can we help teenagers? Well, let's tell the truth about them.
Yes.
By and large, I think that will help, because I think that helps to, you know, support their self-esteem. These kind of the topics that were raised in adolescence, and particularly for you know young men. And boys, you know, that idea of not being understood and the world's not talking about us, that's not fair. That does put them in a vulnerable position, and so I think a lot of it is about maintaining open dialogue, listening, being curious. You know, from what I've seen, a lot of the advice is to, you know, your instinct as a parent can be, that is awful, no, I am banning it, you are not doing that. Well, there was always something that parents did that about, actually. When I, in kind of the early days of when I was doing Time for Kindness, I put something out to my own friends on Facebook, so my generation obviously, but kind of saying, I'm doing this work, and what does kindness mean to you, and what would you want to see out of something like this? And I remember that one of my friends who has a boy, or two boys actually, who said, I would like them to believe that kindness is cool. Yes. Because actually that's what they do. The things that they do or they choose to do are the ones that are cool. Yeah. And so, you know, I doubt very much they even call it cool, do they?
It's some other word. The
language is probably wrong. Whatever the latest word is. But you know, to make it something that they have value. They set value by, essentially. And you know what? It often is. We just don't give them that credit necessarily.
Definitely. And speaking of cool, it brings us on to the other thing that's trending in tech at the moment. So I recently came across a great example of tech being used to promote empathy. So Grammy-winning artist Doechii has launched a free online platform called Anxiety is Watching Me, offering mental health resources and a space for users to share coping strategies, and it's designed to support people dealing with anxiety, especially in digital spaces, which kind of touches on the adolescence thing as well. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you see initiatives like this aligning with your work around seeing kind, and do you think platforms like this can genuinely create more compassionate and connected online communities?
I think they can, and I think they do. And I think a lot of it, you know, it has to be very carefully managed. And you know, I do think there is something really beautiful, really, and it is kind for people to want to help each other, support each other, particularly if you've had lived experience in something, and you can share your learning, your experiences. You know, that idea, you know, we talked earlier about digital isolation, didn't we? And particularly if you are struggling with something like anxiety or mental health challenges, you know, you do feel very alone and like, oh, it must just be me. So I think there is something about those spaces where there's a kindness in knowing you're not alone. The flip side of that, of course, is the aspect of kind of safety and risks of vulnerability and so on. And that's where community managers, like professional community managers, come in, I think, to make sure that those spaces are genuinely safe. And, you know, it's a real skill to kind of get that balance and moderate so that people are able to express themselves freely, but doing it in a way that is safe for everyone. So, I think those spaces, and if you are struggling yourself, again, sometimes it is too much to be able to kind of reach out and connect with people offline in the real world, for want of a better way of putting it. So sometimes, having an online space is a good starting point, actually. So I think, there's a lot of positivity in that as well.
Absolutely. And we come on to the final part of the podcast, which is the this or that quick fire round. So, Sarah, if you had to pick iPhone or Samsung?
Samsung.
And Spotify or Apple?
Spotify.
Netflix or cinema?
I think Netflix would probably just about edit.
Yeah.
But only just.
Yeah. And laptops or tablets?
A laptop.
And ChatGPT or virtual reality?
I actually use Claude.
Oh,
yes. For some reason, I couldn't get on with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
I don't really know why. No particular reason, but I use Claude, and I use it for headlines and things like that when I'm writing, because I have always been notoriously rubbish at headlines. So it's an absolute joy to hand that to someone else.
And video calls or voice notes?
Again, I think voice notes would edit. I do. There is something about hearing my friends' voices when you notes. They're kind of they're dulcet tones, as it were. So I think that's the one I would go for.
And finally, Sarah, if you could bring back one original piece of tech that's now evolved or it no longer exists, what would it be and why?
It would be mixtapes.
Oh, yes.
Which I imagine a lot of people in my generation would talk about, and your younger listeners may not even know what I'm talking about. So yes, when with cassette tapes, when you could record, usually from the radio, songs and so on for friends, for boyfriends, girlfriends. Yeah. And there was I know you can make a list on Spotify. I know that there's sort of an equivalent, but just not quite the same somehow. And I lived in Germany for a year when I was studying, one of the group of friends that I was out there with made a mixtape for us all of kind of the songs that were popular out there that year. It included the local radio jingle and all of that stuff. And my now husband, I met him out there during that year, and so for his birthday or anniversary or something more recently, I remade and in fact what kind of with that recently, because it was a CD actually. I got a CD made of the songs that were on this tape, and even there with the CD it just wasn't quite the same.
I know, there's just something about the tape then sort of losing its like thing as well, like winding it back manually or exactly.
And just I don't know, just the kind of, I suppose because it did take a lot of effort really to do it, so that effort and love that went into it. So that's what I'd bring back.
That's a great answer. But that brings us to the end of this week's episode of Akoni Tech Talks. Thank you so much for joining us, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation.